So if you've ever suffered from frequent headaches or migraines, your gut might be playing a bigger role than you think. And it's not as simple as just like leaky gut and taking probiotics. There's a bit more to it than that. So today I'm going to break down what's really going on between your gut and your brain in the context of headaches, and I'm going to try to back it by as much science as I can. Hi there, I'm Dr. Mark. I've worked with athletes, folks dealing with concussion, and high performers to optimize their recovery and performance. And today, in this video, we're going to talk about the real connection between your gut and your brain, what we know about headaches and digestive function, and what you can do to support both. So let's start by talking about the gut-brain axis. I've talked about this in other videos, but it's this connection between your gut and your brain, and there's three big players. There's an actual physical connection via your vagus nerve. There's immune signaling and like cytokine signaling, and then there's the different neurotransmitters and metabolites that your bacteria, your microbiome will actually produce. The thing to know about neurotransmitters, like most neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, you'll hear these stats that it's like 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut, 70% of dopamine is produced in the gut. It doesn't actually cross the blood-brain barrier. Serotonin and dopamine actually have their own digestive functions, usually to like contract smooth muscle and make sure your digestion works. The dopamine and serotonin you produce in your gut doesn't make you happy in your brain. If it does, it's through very indirect mechanisms, not that neurotransmitter itself. Instead, what we're finding is that the gut bacteria influence the nervous system through immune modulation, short-chain fatty acids, and sort of secondary metabolites or precursor amino acids like tryptophan and things like that. So how do we bring this all to headaches? The thing to know about the gut microbiome research and the gut-brain axis research is that it is all really new, which is why it's really sexy, and people are hopping on to like the new things and the new study and the new publication, but we don't have this huge body of evidence yet to make anything really causative. We can't really say that this distribution of bacteria causes this versus that. Everything here is really correlation and just observation, not so much clear-cut black and white. But what we do have is that studies show gut dysbiosis. So when your gut bacteria are imbalanced, usually in a negative way, dysbiosis, that's correlated with and associated with migraine headaches and even tension type headaches, which is pretty interesting. We've also got certain gut conditions, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, different from IBD like Crohn's and colitis, but IBS, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and other chronic inflammatory conditions that can contribute to headaches via systemic inflammation. So the inflammation from the gut actually just makes its way into the circulation and throughout the rest of the body. Another fun thing that I'm actually seeing a ton clinically these days is histamine intolerance and histamine issues. So histamine intolerance is mediated by your gut microbiome imbalance. Your dysbiosis may trigger headaches in those individuals sensitive to histamine, and this kind of falls into my population that looks a lot like dysautonomia. And then all the mechanisms we just talked about above, like the gut dysbiosis, the histamine, certain conditions like SIBO, IBS. I've talked about it in the context of concussion and post-concussion, where the inflammation from the gut can actually cause and lead to neuroinflammation in the brain via the like release and the mobilization and the movement of these inflammatory cytokines, these inflammatory cell signal markers and metabolic byproducts that work their way out and make their way up to the brain and kind of trigger inflammation in the brain, but it started in the gut. Let's talk about leaky gut in the context of headaches. So if you've heard the conditions of like IBS and SIBO and histamine intolerance, you're probably thinking like, oh, leaky gut. I want to take a soapbox rant. Any chance I get, I take this soapbox rant. The term leaky gut is often misunderstood, and it's probably a misnomer. It's probably not the appropriate term. Intestinal permeability does fluctuate normally. It'll change with exercise and different things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your toxins and your bacteria are now flooding your bloodstream. So just a quote, there's a great study, tight junctions but loose associations, and it's looking at leaky gut. The gut lumen, so your gut tube, contains about 10 to the third power to 10 to the 11th power bacteria per milliliter. That in aggregate, if we took all those bacteria, contains 1 gram or more of endotoxin, like lipopolysaccharide, LPS. If that was purified and intravenously injected, it could be fatal to hundreds or even thousands of humans. You've got enough bacteria to kill hundreds or thousands of humans in your gut. If that was leaking, at the very least, you would feel it. So if we give parenteral, so bypass the gut, and we just administer minute amounts of this endotoxin to humans, it elicits an inflammatory reaction typical of SIRS, where we get fever or or hypothermia, tachycardia, hyperpnea, leukocytosis, and hypotension. Whereas if we give larger amounts of this endotoxin, say like in a leaky gut, we would actually get sepsis or shock. That's the end of my soapbox rant there. But essentially it is, if we actually truly leaked, we would be septic and have a lot more problems. What's more likely happening is immune modulation, where Peyer's patches, M cells in your gut actually grab the bacteria, grab the endotoxin and pull it in. And that's why you'll see endotoxin in the blood, but it's not because it leaked there. It was very strategically grabbed and pulled in. So why does this matter? That's just a soapbox rant to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't always be tackling this paracellular route. It's more didactic, academic, aimed at my fellow MDs and clinicians in functional medicine who talk about leaky gut all the time. But why does this matter in the big picture? Chronic gut inflammation and microbe imbalances can increase neuroinflammation, which is a known headache trigger, stuff we kind of talked about already in this video. So if we can improve gut barrier function, not necessarily making these junctions tighter, but making them less inflamed, giving the immune system in the gut less reasons to be pissed off, we might actually be able to reduce systemic inflammation and improve your outcomes. And it's not just this one-size-fits-all leaky gut approach. So now that I just said it wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach, what are some one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter things that we can do to improve most people's gut health? Starting with an anti-inflammatory diet. That's a term that I don't really like, anti-inflammatory. If you had to pick one, I would pick Mediterranean. The Mediterranean style diet is one of the most researched diets that we have across numerous conditions. It can be adapted across cultures. It can be adapted in restaurants. It's easy to cook at home. It's sort of the most socially acceptable medical diet around there. And it's going to emphasize whole foods, fiber, polyphenols, so your phytonutrients, your plant nutrients from fruits and veggies that are going to support your gut bacteria and a diverse microbiome. The next thing to look at is limiting common headache trigger foods. So when you look in the migraine world and you look in the headache world, there's common foods that are known to trigger headaches in many people. Not everyone, but many people. And they're going to do better by avoiding dairy, ultra-processed foods, and then high histamine foods that may contribute to headaches. There's also a category of foods like high tyramine foods, cured meats, aged cheeses, things like that, where you're going to want to avoid the trigger. The next thing, and this may be hard in 2025, manage stress. So the gut-brain axis is highly sensitive to stress and to your autonomic, sympathetic fight or flight, parasympathetic rest and recover activities. So adding things like breath work, adding things like meditation, adding things, paced breathing, making sure that your sleep hygiene is intact and you're prioritizing sleep maybe over any of those other things is critical. The other thing to consider is targeted probiotics. So we're not going to talk about the different strains and species and things here, but certain strains may help with inflammation, may help with neurotransmitter balance. It's not a cure-all. It's not going to be better than your foundations of health across the board. When we look at the microbiome research, your lifestyle, your sleep, your stress, what food you're eating on a day-to-day basis, how much you're moving, that matters way more to your microbiome than the probiotic pill that you're taking. And then the other thing would be to just make sure you're hydrated. Hydration, electrolytes. Dehydration is a major headache trigger independent of your microbiome. But if you're dehydrated, it also affects gut motility. Dehydrated people tend to be more constipated. And so if you're not moving stuff out, that gut can have time to do dysbiotic things. So while the gut-brain connection is very real through the vagus nerve, metabolites, your microbiome and all that, it's not as simple as leaky gut or taking a probiotic. So if you're dealing with headaches, remember to start by addressing your gut through diet, lifestyle, sleep, stress management, the foundations of health first, then get nitty-gritty with your doctor. If you found this video helpful, if you learned something, if you liked anything I said, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the YouTube things. It's free for you, helps me out. I super appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Dr. Mark.